Hello everyone! Welcome aboard the TQ Non-Profit Digital Voyage, a show where we talk about tech, social and public good, and how you can get involved. I'm your host, Imelia, and I hope everyone can sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. If you're ready, let's set sail! And now, on to our episode. Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode of TQ's Non-Profit Digital Voyage. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Sabrina. Sabrina, please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi everyone, my name is Sabrina. I'm a content writer in TQ and I'll be your co-host today. I will also be your future host in the upcoming few episodes, so stay tuned for that.
Yep, and I'm very happy to have Sabrina on the show with us as well. We are also joined today by our guest, our very own intern, Latifa. Okay, would you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hello everyone, good day to you all. My name is Latifa Rafat. I go by L. I'm 21 years old and I am Egyptian and Moroccan. I'm currently a research and content development intern in Thundercoat. So that's what I'm currently doing. And I am a psychology student doing my bachelor's. So those are the main two things going on in my life right now.
All right. So I guess to start things off, maybe you would like to, explain, what's your day-to-day like in TQ?
Alright, so as a research and content development intern, my original tasks would involve research for any piece of work. That can be something from as small as a caption for an Instagram post to something as large as an article. It's also about creating written content. Again, the written content can differ in size and nature. So that's what I originally do. However, in TQ, I enjoy the privilege of being able to work on multiple things and explore different areas. So I also work on outreach. I contact nonprofits and organizations to liaise with them. I'm also able to work on slides editing sometimes or quality check for content. So it's very diverse what I'm able to do basically.
That's great to know. How do you feel how do you find your internship experience so far?
Honestly, there have been challenging areas, but there have also been very rewarding areas. It's a very thrilling learning curve. That's the best way I can describe it. I learn a lot and change a lot every day in what I can do and learning about what I can't do and then extending the time to be able to do it and so on. It's a good experience.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're enjoying your time at TQ, and I hope that you'll continue to learn more stuff during your throughout your internship. And also, since you mentioned it, you're a psychology student, and we
Yes.
we have quite a lot of psychology students in TQ as well. And actually, can you maybe talk a little bit about your course and what's your day-to-day and what do you study in university? Yep.
Alright, gladly. So, my psychology course is mainly a basic introduction to the psychology world. So, in other words, if you want to qualify as anything in psychology, this is the first step, which is the Bachelor of Science in Psychology. It takes 3 years to complete, and we go through all the branches and approaches in psychology. So, we study theories of personality, individual differences, environmental differences. We study physical things such as biopsychology. We delve a little bit into neuropsychology, and then we study the therapeutic aspect, so counseling, psychotherapy, and then we go to statistics. So it's quite diverse, and it's just immersed in different fields so that students can get an idea of what they want to do after the bachelor, which is the more specialized step. We also study about education, marriage and family systems. It's a lot of basically it's a lot of information in different sides. That's the best way I can describe it.
From the sounds of it, it seems like you pretty much learn about everything, right, in psychology, more or less. Do you have plans to maybe specialize in it, in a certain aspect of psychology in the future?
Yes, my hopes and dreams are that I get to specialize in the clinical aspect of psychology because psychopathology has always been what interested me. I'm always interested in the aspect of mental disorders, mental disabilities, and how potentially you could help clients or patients to get out of that place that they are in, or resolve their problem and be able to go back to their daily life. So that's what I would really love to specialize in.
Great. And if I'm not wrong, you're also in your final year, correct?
Correct.
Then you're probably working on your final year project as well, right?
Yes.
Or FYP. Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Of course. So about my final year project, it's mainly it's again inspired by my whole interest in the psychopathology and mental illnesses and so on. But this time I targeted a more hit home sort of criteria. So I went for university students. The topic is investigating the decision-making process of how university students avert seeking therapy. Yes, so basically, to put it in a very explanatory way, university students, a lot of them reported by many statistics all over the world, have mental problems. Perhaps they are a sensitive group to mental problems even more than other groups. And this could be for many reasons. Perhaps it's just the whole, many milestones during one specific cluster of few years.
That's true.
Yeah. So like financial issues, familial issues, deciding on career choices. There are a lot of things that people in that specific group deal with. So while that is the case, not a lot of university students seek help or therapy. In fact, perhaps like there was a recent statistics in 2016 by the Ministry of Health in Malaysia that only 1/3 of students who need help, who reported that they needed help, actually sought it and followed up on that. So I just found it very interesting and wanted to study why that is the case and what influences this decision for students. What are the factors? What are the different attributes? So that's my topic.
I see. I guess you can say that you can see, especially with COVID happening, we can also see a lot of students are struggling with distant learning, and that also contributes to it, right?
Yeah, a lot. Of course, the COVID scene has been hectic on mental health, and there were a lot of unfortunate tragedies due to that.
I guess then we can continue to talk about our main topic for today, which is about burnouts. So I guess relating to your final year project, you will also touch about burnouts as well, I assume. And it's a common mental health issue among the youths, especially like you said, among students. Do you want to explain more about what a burnout is?
I mean, if I cannot explain that, I do not know what can I explain. Because, alright. So I'll start by giving a personal point of view, and then I'll delve into the more technical side of it. So in my little experience of working, studying, simply existing, I've learned that burnout is metaphorically the most silent and disguised problem that can just completely destroy a person's mental state and then extend to destroy everything else. It's really lethal but really silent. So that's the most I would say dangerous thing about burnout. Burnout psychologically is defined as a state or condition that results from prolonged and continuous exposure to stress. And this stress can be interpersonal or can be work related or can be related to many things. But the idea is that there is continuous interaction with this source of stress. So whether it happens to according to like due to like professional setting reasons or personal, it's just very destructive to the person, to the individual that is going through it as a whole. So it extends to destruct a person's social, emotional life, all of it. Internally, burnout feels like having no interest in work or in other life aspects and lacking concentration and motivation. So this is how it would feel like on the inside for a person suffering from it. And then externally, it can manifest as being restless, forgetting many things. It can even sometimes extend to like very physical symptoms such as high blood pressure or, you know, a lot of headaches or difficulties breathing, because it can be paired with high levels of anxiety. So this is what burnout looks like or manifests as in people. I was just going to add something about this very useful model of burnout when I was studying, trying to understand it. It's called the Bergen Burnout Inventory. So according to this model, we have 3 components that just identify that this is a burnout. So first one would be overwhelming exhaustion. Second one would be cynicism, and third one would be a sense of ineffectiveness. And when you really think about them, it's just it hits quite to the point of what a burnout is, that it needs all those 3 to be there.
Okay, I see. I was going to mention that the descriptions of a burnout sounds quite similar to a typical description of depression, or like the symptoms, I guess, that leads to depression. How would you differentiate those 2?
Okay, that is actually quite true. And what they share is that a person suffering from them would have a lack of interest in ongoing events or in their life, a lack of motivation, a lack of, you know, the whole spirit. But the key difference between them is that depression contains an overwhelming sense of sadness that gets carried around, but burnout does not necessarily contain the emotion of sadness, at least not as consistently as depression does. Burnout sometimes can feel like no emotion, and just a big long series of feeling tired and tired and tired. While depression can feel like that sometimes, it still feels like sadness, negative beliefs, more than just exhaustion. So that's the idea.
Interesting. I think burnout, the term burnout, is also like being used pretty often recently. What do you think is causing this almost universal feeling of burnouts?
So the idea, what causes burnout in general for humans, is the idea that they could be exerting a lot of effort in a job position or even in a personal situation or relationship. So this is one possible cause. It can also be caused from getting little or no recognition for that effort. So it's more probable that a person getting no recognition for their effort gets to feel burnout. And then it can also be due to factors that are very personal to a person. So for example, personality traits. Let's say someone is very perfectionist, has excessive conscientiousness, is a workaholic by nature. So those things also can really contribute to that. But when it comes to the universal, like, since you addressed that, I think there has been in the past this idealization of hustle culture. I'm sure you guys can relate to that.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like the more you work, you work until you are tired. That's such an idealized and positively viewed type of mindset, even though it's very destructive. So there's that tendency that everyone wants to prove that they are working, everyone wants to prove that they are hardworking, because that's sort of the behavior that's rewarded. And although recently a lot of companies or people have been speaking up against it and saying that, oh no, this culture is not healthy, it affects people in such ways and such ways. But there's a huge gap, because from the point of realizing that no, this culture is not really healthy, to the point of something being done, yeah, the gap is really, really huge.
That is true. That is true. Speaking of the gap between doing something about these issues and the issues itself, from your research with your final year project, how are these challenges addressed, especially in Malaysia? So, like, how are organizations making things more accessible for, let's say, students in order to get help?
So far, from my research, the idea is for university students, they are always advised to turn to an in-campus counselor. The issue with that is that students often hesitate to actually turn to the in-campus counselor, because there would be a few students who tried it and said that there wasn't much benefit, for instance. So that was the case in some universities. In some universities, they would fear that this would have repercussions on their record in university. So the idea is that not much is known about what happens if you seek the counselor's advice within university. So because students don't know what the procedure is or what will happen, and there's little knowledge about that, they are nervous and then reluctant to actually seek it. So that's in regards to students. When it comes to free, like, let's say, giving affordable or free therapy to students or to anyone in general, there's very, very little of that. Therapy sessions are really expensive. And
That's true.
yes, and then when they go to the affordable side of the spectrum, it compromises the quality of service or therapy you're going to get. So if you are gonna go for, let's say, a clinical psychologist, you are gonna be expecting to pay from, I don't know, am I allowed to say a range of money?
You can give a vague figure, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you are going for a fully qualified, certified clinical psychologist, you would be going from like a 300 per session or less, but less, like, it does not go less than really 150. And yeah, that's how it is. And then the lesser than that, it will be not like an assistant clinical psychologist or an assistant counselor, and it would just, keep going to that side. So
these are from the private sector, correct?
yes.
What do you think about the government side of things? Like, the government clinics and things like that. Do you think that's very more accessible? Will you feel?
There have been a lot of efforts to make it more accessible. That is, like, undeniable. However, especially with the COVID condition, the demand was too much. That's the idea. That made the access sometimes not as readily available, because there was such a high demand continuously on the government facilities especially. So that made it difficult. And I know this because previously in my university, I was the Student Council President Association person. And then students would turn to us for help, and they would ask us for references, where can they go, and so on. And one time it took like up to 2 or 3 weeks to finally find this student an available therapy session.
And this is with the government?
Yes, because the student had a financial issue and could not really afford private. So then we had to really keep looking for government, because private was way above their budget. So in terms of, like, that's in terms of university students. In terms of organizations, whenever you go on LinkedIn, there's always like a lot of talk about mental health and burnout. And there's a lot of, it's just too perfectionist or idealistic what's going on over there, and you feel like you don't necessarily see that in real life in the daily work scene, because in the end there is this consistent attitude or consistent, like, underlying expectation that as an employee or as a person in society, you have a certain job and you're expected to conduct it. And when things don't go well, it's not really a very accepted thing. You know, it's not very welcomed or very supported as a state to be in. Like there will always be a lot of heaviness to that. It's not readily accepted. So I would say organizations may have been starting to make efforts, but it's not there yet.
What are some of the things that you've maybe noticed? Like, what are some of the efforts that you've seen then?
Most of the time, the efforts are more towards the break the stigma, raise awareness about mental health, you know, this side of efforts. Because, okay, of course, breaking the stigma is such an important part, because the stigma around seeking mental health, or the stigma around speaking up about mental health issues, is one of the largest barriers for everything, for any movement forward. Like, it's a big barrier. However, the continuous campaigns for awareness reach to a point where they become in vain. Not completely in vain, but in a way where it's like, okay, and now what? So we all know, and then now what? Like, yes, how can
What's
we help
the
you?
next step? What's the next step
Exactly.
then? Okay.
Exactly. So there has been so much effort and so much emphasis on the whole awareness thing. However, not an equivalent amount of like action and effort on the health side, the actual help that people need. And unfortunately, like some people, or there would be a lot of unqualified people even speaking sometimes, so like just random influencers coming up and saying things, or it became like a brand washing type of behavior. So let's just talk about mental health awareness. Okay, and you know the whole so it's there's a lot of that happening. There's a lot of talking and a lot of awareness campaigns, but not a lot of action, and not a lot of let's say procedure given to people. So for example, when they make people aware that this mental health is just as important as physical health and so on, what can people do? Like, what is it that people can help themselves with? That type of information is not as often shared, or is not as often like...
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
I think there's a lack of sharing of ways to intervene, you know, interventions for
Exactly.
your mental health, right? I
Yeah.
really I think it's funny that you mentioned about LinkedIn and the conversations of mental health, because I think LinkedIn is one of my reasons, one of the stressors in my life for having to be a perfect employee all the time.
Oh dear.
Yeah, they
But let's
display that image.
Anyways, I think I remember I think it was last year that the government did a psychosocial helpline, something about like opening up a helpline for people to reach out to like get counseling help. Do you think that was effective at all?
I think during a certain time it was extremely effective, because the idea is that there was like a sudden burst in the amount of people who were seeking therapy. Like that was specifically during the lockdown, the complete lockdown. That was the most time people were just going towards these hotlines, and a lot of times like they would be completely occupied. So the fact that they were completely occupied should indicate that they were effective in some way, or else they wouldn't be completely occupied. So there's that. And yes, hotlines in general help because they're an immediate way of reaching or trying to reach someone. So people are more likely to go for hotlines because the whole, like, it lacks the whole waiting factor where they just wait for an appointment and so on. Yeah.
That is true. I think it's similar to the concept of, let's say, BetterHelp, where you don't have that waiting period.
Yep.
Where you're plagued with like anxiety, or like, you know, waiting for your session and stuff.
And that was very useful for emergency cases, because of course here's the thing about mental health: instead of just addressing like certain disorders that people can be suffering from and so on, it also goes as far as addressing actual criminal activities in a way, such as like domestic abuse, physical abuse, because in the end, even those patients, even those cases or victims, sorry, a lot of them would go through a mental health hotline first. So they would call in order to like be able to talk or, just express their feelings. And then at some point it's like, okay, so what's happening with you? And then there's a whole physical abuse or domestic abuse scenario going on. So mental hotlines, or the concept of mental health, oftentimes leads to people getting help that they needed in other ways as well. So that was extremely necessary during COVID and lockdown.
I see. Okay, so speaking of like organizations making things more accessible, do you know any like nonprofits that helps in mental health awareness or accessibility? And do you know any nonprofits where youths can join if they want to be involved or if they want to participate?
Of course, just a disclaimer in this regard. Because mental health or psychology or this type of area is an area where you are dealing with actual people who have actual problems, and in order to be able to deal with that, it's necessary to have a certain set of qualifications. And those qualifications go as far as a bachelor and a master's and a PhD. Let's not go there. So the idea is that most of the volunteering posts available are related to other areas. So this organization will be specialized in mental health, but where it needs volunteers will not necessarily be that part. So you're helping them, let's say, in any other area relevant to your specialty, and then they need that help, but it's not going to be always related to the mental health itself unless an individual is qualified or studying for that area.
But I believe it will still be a learning experience either way, I would say.
Definitely, yes. Volunteering is a very valuable learning experience, and the whole concept of actually doing something, and it's for the learning experience more than, and for the benefit of the people that it will be benefiting more than anything else. Yeah, and there are a few posts that I found relevant to, like, for myself when I was looking to join something. And the most, like, I'd highlight the most known ones, or not necessarily known ones, but like the most accredited ones of like large organizations. So for example, the Malaysian Mental Health Association, they have constantly on their website, like, they update what sort of volunteering people or what sort of volunteering qualifications they need. So currently they needed someone for like designing, photography for their events, assistance during events, so like the whole event managing thing, and assistance in publishing work. So their line of work extends much further than that, but in order to be able to sustain their line of work, they need to host events and create content and the lot of it. So they need people to help them in that as well. And then there is another organization, it's called Thrive Well. A lot of people might know it as its old name, Sol's Health, but its new name is Thrive Well. And they always seek volunteers, and their whole they make it a point to create a program where students have a structure of learning. So when you join them as a volunteer or as an intern, it's not about just doing certain tasks that are at hand. No, they create a system for how you will learn. So they create deliverables and so on, and you work under certain people. So I'd say for like people going for a psychological point of view or experience, it would be better to join them as an intern for 3 or 6 months, because then you learn more about the mental health side of things. But if you're interested in just helping out, then volunteering can be very valuable as well. And the things they need help in like range from project management to translation to fundraising to public relations, a lot of fields basically that are not necessarily mental health related. So yeah, they welcome that kind of help. And then there is the Mental Illness Awareness and Support Association as well. And they also need like events, marketing team, research team. It's also a really big association that has been doing a lot, especially on the awareness side of the
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
I think that's the most well-known, for me at least. That's the organization that I hear about the most.
Yeah. And finally, there's Plus Vibes. And the whole idea of Plus Vibes is that you can volunteer, and after getting a certain training, you are qualified to be a part of an app. And this app is similar. The idea is similar to a hotline where you get to listen to people and help people. So it's sort of, it's not exactly the job of a therapist, but it's the job of running an intervention. So
I see.
yeah, there's a whole concept of mental health first aid, like this term. They coined the term mental health first aid in this way where, okay, so a therapist or only a therapist or a licensed individual can make a screening and then give you a diagnosis and then start the treatment. But like before you get there, you need something sometimes. It's not everyone is just able to be like, okay, wait, I am not the same functioning individual that I should be or that I have been. So let me go seek help. Like a lot of times there will be a friend or a relative or a person who's in that process. And oftentimes this person can do harm because they don't know what they're doing. So that's where the whole mental health first aid term comes. So it's like people that get to recognize the symptoms, get to direct help in a positive way, and just direct them towards going where they should go. So this is basically the idea of joining as a volunteer in Plus Vibes. It's a very interesting.
Speaking of Plus Vibes, just to cue in our listeners, we will be having Plus Vibes as our guests in the future episode, where we will talk more, sort of like in depth about what they do.
Exciting.
And yes, and a little bit more about mental health as well. So please look forward to that. And I guess, a little question from me as well. We sort of like went on a little bit on a tangent about mental health in general, but I do want to sort of like bring back a little bit about burnouts as well. You've talked about how organizations while there has been efforts, it's not there yet, in terms of mental health and stuff. And I was wondering, like, okay, is there an advice that you could give, maybe as a student, from a perspective of a student, or even from a perspective of, a working person, since, you are, undergoing your internship right now. If someone comes up to you and like, hey, I think I'm feeling a little bit burnout, what do I do? And how can I, sort of like help to sort of like lessen the feeling? Do you have any sort of like advice to that?
Yeah, I think primarily, okay, the whole idea of hustle culture is that it just pushes towards this idea of like, oh, so you were not 5 minutes early to that meeting, to every meeting, and then you were not 10 minutes late after your working time, and then you were not, oh, really? That means you're a bad employee. And so like I'd tell the student or a person who's like in an entry level, or any person honestly, to just, it's not that deep. You want to be punctual, you want to be responsible, of course, but you're human, you're not a robot, you are bound to make mistakes, you are bound to get some things wrong, and it's just the natural thing to happen. Like that belief or that like constant seeking the unattainable standard of perfection is like one of the main causes of burnout. So I'd say I'd go there first. But if I'm giving more close-up and personal advice to a person who's asking me, I'd say that mental health or dealing with burnout or any of those things, it's not a separate problem to yourself and your life. So basically, just imagine you go to an ordinary doctor and you tell him about a certain problem or her about a certain problem, like, oh, my chest hurts, or I get headaches all the time, any problem, or I get stomachache all the time. The doctor is definitely going to have questions about what do you eat, how often do you eat, how much do you sleep, like about your lifestyle, because you are attached to that. It's not separate.
Mm-mm.
So similarly in burnout, it's like, okay, so what do you do for yourself? What's your um, daily routine in a way? How much time do you dedicate to take care of yourself and to just sort of relax and wind up? So those are all things that I would advise a person to definitely try to get them to the healthiest level possible. Then a lot of mental health problems will just really like reduce significantly. Of course, it's not gonna like doing some self mental health or self reflection or self care is not gonna eliminate a mental disorder, but it will help in a way to reduce like the whole severity of it, perhaps. Yeah.
I understand. I feel like in a way when you get burnout, it's like a symptom that's showing that there's something that you need to change in your life because
Definitely.
there's something that's lacking. Yeah.
Definitely, yes. And another, like, okay, so just touching a bit because, okay, no one asked me this, like, it's not a question, but I'm just gonna elaborate.
Sure.
You remember the model that I explained earlier where there is like A, overwhelming exhaustion, B, cynicism, and C, a sense of ineffectiveness. So the idea is all these three come from similar things to like each other. So let's say, okay, the overwhelming exhaustion comes from overworking, obviously, and cynicism comes from like, having like whole doubts about what you're working on or doubts about yourself. So it just verges into like how you feel about your work, how you feel about yourself, about your surroundings, and then a sense of ineffectiveness deals with like how you feel about your relationship to what's around you. So do you feel effective and useful as a person, or do you feel that your efforts are for naught? Or so when it comes to all those things, it brings me back to the whole idea that if people do work they do not want to do and they sort of push themselves against that, it's just very natural that there will be very high levels of stress. So yeah, burnout is not, again, it's back to the point where burnout is not a separate sudden thing that happens. It's just about your whole, it's attached to your whole lifestyle, nature of work, nature of character, all of those things. So yeah, it's basically very extensive into what the person is going through. Yeah, it's very, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So I was just gonna tie it back to the model because yeah, the whole overwhelming exhaustion, cynicism, sense of ineffectiveness, it's very descriptive of what happens and on many fronts really.
All right. So before we end this podcast, do you have any final remarks? Maybe you want to redirect people to somewhere where they can get help, or any final remarks?
Yes, sure. Okay, so my most important remark I would say is that not to be like the whole conspiracy theorist or anything, but sometimes the existing world idealizes an organization or idealizes a group or idealizes your workplace over you as an individual. Like they prioritize that, they give that a priority because obviously, a whole organizational entity has sort of like, again, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but the whole organization has monetary value. You get it? And you as a poor little individual, you don't necessarily have that monetary value. So it becomes your job as an individual to prioritize yourself and to put yourself first. And that is
true.
whether it is like against other people or against organizations or against anything. Not against in a sense that this is a war and there are sides, but just as in a scale where there's you need to be big in your life and then everything else comes. And it's just all gonna come back in retrospect. So the more you take care of yourself, the better you are going to be dealing with everything else in your life. It's connected. There is no image of success where you are extremely drained, exhausted, depressed, but then your job is perfect and everything is going on well in your job. That image can last. As long as it lasts, it will end, it will shatter, because that's just it's all you in the end, and there is no
Yeah.
image where you are exhausted and drained and then you're just the perfect student or the perfect anything. So the idea is that if you are not doing well, nothing else in your life will continue to do well. You have to prioritize yourself first. So that's what I would like to say.
All right. And I'd like to add that if you are feeling down, if you are experiencing some issues and you need help, you can always contact your nearest government clinic to be able to assess whether you need a professional therapist or professional psychiatrist to be able to see you. So because we're not trying to say that if you have a mental illness or if you have difficulty going through life that you need to change a certain part of your lifestyle. This is just like one small aspect to
Exactly. Yes,
mental
thank you.
health issues. Yeah, we're like specifically in burnouts, like these are just some advice that we're just sharing. Always seek professional help is the most important
Definitely.
advice that we can give you guys.
May I add one more thing?
Go ahead.
All right. So a lot of times people are afraid to seek professional help because there's this sort of reputation going on that the psychiatrist will recommend you meds and then the meds will have bad side effects and so on. So this is just a misconception I'd like to correct. When you seek mental health, the type of help available is diverse. There's a lot of different things you can seek help through. So for example, you have options. You can go for counseling, which they also dub as talking therapy. You can go for the actual psychiatrist, where this is where you are more on the physical side and you get meds. You can go for group therapy. There are different types of services that you would be presented as options. So you are still in control. Like it's not that the moment you seek help, your faith goes out of your hand and the whole people will be deciding what happens. You get the option, you get to decide what sort of help you are able to operate with best, because in the end, mental health is not about just fixing something that is broken in that way. No, it's about helping you attain yourself again. So that's the idea.
Yeah.
Just outline that.
And even when we're talking about talking therapy or seeing a therapist, there's so many different kinds of therapy as well, right? Different kinds of talking therapy that you go through. So doesn't mean that if you get help and it doesn't suit you that there's no other options of talking therapy that might work better for you. So I think it's important to just go on and try again, because there's something out there for you to help you.
Most definitely. Yep.
Yeah.
There's always hope, essentially.
There's always hope. That is true. Okay, well, I guess we've reached the end of our episode. So thank you so much for joining us in this conversation, Al. And I hope our audience, our listeners, found it as beneficial as we did. And so before we end things off, any final words you'd like to add?
I'd just like to say thank you for having me, and it was extremely fun. And yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. So thank you to our listeners. We hope you enjoyed this episode. So we hope to see you soon in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye. And that was today's episode. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and leave a review. It would mean a whole lot to us. You can also head over to our website, thundercode.org, to gain access to our free digital resources. See you next time!